Welcome back, public education advocates. It's the Ask Dr. Be Good show where we share the practice, the pedagogy, and the politics currently happening in public education. As always, I ask that you write your name in the comments when you come in and let me know your thoughts, observations, questions about the topic being discussed. You know, I'm a longtime teacher, so I enjoy having an actively participating class during the show. Even if you listen later, your questions will be answered if you go ahead and pop them in the comment section so that I can know that you were here and that you wanted more information, because that's important. Now, let's get started. As some of you know, we have in public education a lot of talk about federal funding, and we've had a very generous amount of federal funding that has been sent to the states by the Biden administration. But you may have also been reading that in some states like Texas, that money is not making it to the districts yet. And so to join us today is Kara Belew, former Deputy Commissioner of Finance for the state of Texas. And she's going to explain a little bit about what's going on behind the scenes, and that everything you read in the newspapers isn't always what's actually happening. So Kara, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to talking a little bit about almost $16 billion in federal money that is heading Texas's way, and certainly to some other states got some money from the big COVID relief bills that were passed. So look forward to talking to you about them.
Well, and so I'm already reading that there are states that have already sent that money to schools and are already working, because that money is specific to helping with getting those kids to climb out of their COVID gap, right? So how is it that other states are able to already have that money and use the money, but Texas is not?
Well, speaking really specifically about Texas, most people who move here sooner or later figure out we have a very complicated property tax and school finance system. And being a school finance expert who studied several systems nationwide, I can attest to the fact that our system is very complicated in Texas. We have some school systems, as you may know, who pay Robin Hood or recapture, so they don't receive a lot of state or federal money always. And then we have some school districts who are all almost totally reliant on state money, so they do receive a lot of state and federal money. So when you have a bill pass at the congressional level where they may not be familiar with all of the complicating factors in Texas's system, sometimes you don't see those federal bills mesh well with the Texas system, causing a lot of confusion and a real slowdown in getting the money out the door to the school districts.
So I'm hearing and reading that legislators are not letting us have the money in Texas, that they're holding on to it. Is that true?
No, it's really not true. What's happened in Texas is that the three big bills that passed, they're sometimes called ESSER, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3, the three big federal bills that passed, they all kind of had different restrictions on how you would distribute the money. So in Texas, not only do we have a very complicated school finance system, we also have 1,200 school districts. And before Texas and the governor and the commissioner of education, who'd ultimately be responsible for distributing that money, can distribute it, they have to really understand federal law and have basically buy-off from the U.S. Department of Education. And right now, it's really not clear from the U.S. Department of Education how Texas should distribute the money, given all the complications in the Texas school finance system at the state and local level.
I heard that what made it even more complicated was that our legislators had actually done what we'd asked them to do. You don't know this, but behind the scenes, there's a huge advocacy push by many organizations, mine included, to get parents and staff to email their legislators, and this was before session started, to say, don't mess with public education money, don't cut the funding, yes, we know COVID hurt us as far as the budget, but please don't cut us. How, and then they didn't, right? And so how did that actually not help things?
Well, it didn't help things because the federal law has several provisions in it about how you can use the money. And one of the provisions that's been very difficult for Texas is the maintenance of effort provisions. And that's just a fancy word for saying what the federal government expected Texas to do is to cut state money for education. And then the federal government was going to make up for that hole. They were going to put the money in where the state had failed to pay the amount. Well, in Texas, the state had decided already it was going to pay the full amount. So we weren't going to have a hole in our state budget. So we don't have that hole. Now it's money on top of what you were going to already get from the state. And that's one area that's causing a ton of complication in how to distribute the money. Is we're not really maintaining effort toward our state funding. We're going to put all of our state funding in and then some more federal money on top of that. A couple other very difficult clauses in the federal law are there's a proportionality clause that says you have to spend money in proportion in public education that you're going to spend in higher education. So that's another big formula issue. Well, what proportion needs to go to higher ed? What proportion needs to go to public ed? And then the final thing that's causing a big, kind of what are we going to do in the formulas is actually an equity provision. So they're talking about how do we equitably distribute the money, specifically thinking about poor or low income students and families where school systems really might be facing a crisis. A final thing just at the state level is a lot of the legislature wants to ensure that schools are paid back for any COVID-related expenses. So even if it turns out they're not eligible for any of this federal money, none of the $14-15 billion that is coming to Texas, the legislature still wants to make sure those schools that aren't eligible for the federal money get some money to make up for the COVID-related expenses that they've incurred over the last year.
And so what you mean by that is for right now, the easiest thing would be to just let Title I schools that work with the lower socioeconomic kids have the majority of the money. But
that's one of the tensions is how do we distribute, given all these, given the state formula system, given the maintenance of effort, given the equity, what you're talking about Title I, or do we deliver money to poorer students or poorer communities versus more wealthy communities? All of these various formula problems layered onto what is already a very complicated state formula system is really creating what the Commissioner of Education, Commissioner Morath, is calling a quagmire. So because of all of this, Texas is not able to distribute the money. I do know that the governor, the commissioner, and the legislature are working hard with the U.S. Department of Ed to make sure that when they do distribute these billions and billions of dollars of funds, that it's in a way that is consistent with the federal law and the way the U.S. Department of Ed wants it distributed. Because if we distribute it to all the schools the wrong way, and the schools spend it, then we've got a ginormous problem on our hands. So when they distribute the money, they want to be really clear it's the right amount of money and that the federal government agrees that Texas is doing it the right way.
So am I right in thinking, because I know some people are saying, you know what, the rich districts are rich. Let just the Title I schools, the schools that serve the highest number of social, economically disadvantaged kids have the money. But in this case, even Highland Park incurred, Highland Park is our wealthiest district in the Dallas area. Even some of your Plano, for example, Plano sends millions of dollars in recapture, which means that they don't get to keep all their money. They have to send millions of dollars, and like 30 million, let's say, and sometimes more, to the state of Texas to be redistributed to the less wealthy states. And so they, in many ways, need the money as much as the rest of the Title I districts do, because they have not only incurred COVID costs, but they've lost enrollment.
Yeah. I mean, it's really hard especially in a state like Texas with 1,200 different school districts, some of the wealthiest communities in the United States, some of the largest communities in the United States, biggest cities, but also being the largest rural educator in the entire United States, you have a ton of different school districts with different needs that have incurred all different kinds of costs. So it's hard to just say that a school district that we might assume was in a more affluent area has not actually had a very significant cost creation by COVID.
Yes, and so I know that in some ways the state of Texas has recognized that most districts who didn't get their enrollment back, especially around the pre-K grades, early childhood grades, those mamas held on to those babies and kept them home. They have been able to tap into their last year, a better period of time when their enrollment was higher, and they're able to use those numbers. And so the hope is that this money that comes in, and correct me if I'm wrong, will be able to continue that payment of being able to pay districts for kids that actually aren't there right now and haven't been there.
Yeah, so the state of Texas pays school districts based on the number of students that they have in school every day. And certainly through COVID, it's been a very uneven thing. In certain communities, a lot of students were suddenly gone from school. And in certain areas, that just wasn't the community's nature, and a lot of students ended up staying in the school. So the schools that lost a lot of students, then they don't have that money coming in, but they still have all the costs for the teachers and the school building and all of that. So with the first tranche actually of the ESSER money, the first big $2 billion, a lot of that was spent trying to make sure schools were held harmless when students left the school, and to pay for some other things that schools needed, like PP&E. We needed all of a sudden a lot of virtual technology and learning and blended learning tools. And so some of that money was used for that.
So we have talked about some very complicated things in a short period of time, but I think that we very much helped our audience understand how complicated this is, and it continues to be, until we can get the people to figure out how to get that money to really all the districts in Texas, whether they're considered wealthy or not, without the strings, because that's what you keep hearing. There's so many strings attached right now that it's not worth taking.
There's strings, and there's multiple formula systems that don't marry well, that are having to be married up. What I can say is I've read in the newspapers a lot that there's some reluctance on the behalf of Texas leadership, or that they won't take the money. And the Commissioner of Education has made it clear in a presentation he just made to the State Board of Education that Texas does want the money. We are working on getting the money. It's extremely complicated formula system, and essentially Texas needs buy-off, an understanding, an agreement from the federal government before this massive distribution of money, to avoid sending it out the wrong way and really creating a lot of problems. So Texas is working hard. Unfortunately, it's much, much slower than it needs to be, probably, for our Texas schools and our students.
Well, I thank you for coming on, and really what I would like to do is, once this is resolved, have you come back on.
Sure.
Yes. Have you tell us.
We'll know the runs. We'll know what every school in Texas is going to get.
Right. And so share the good news, and especially how because you're sort of in the back there. You've got some good contacts, and so you can share with us, how did it actually come about that we actually were able to finally get the money. So thank you for being on, and we look forward, and maybe sooner rather than later, to have you on and share the success story.
Yes, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. It's an honor, and thank anybody who's watching for the wonderful work you do for students.
Well, and that's because they're worth it. And so thank you, Kara. Next, and really having to do with attendance and enrollment and getting kids in school and getting them back, to slide out of that COVID slide, is attendance, right? And so we're going to visit for a little bit with our retired judge guru, Judge Payton, because he has a company that is making and having success with families and schools. And so, Judge Payton, talk a little bit about the truancy process that you're bringing to districts, and now some of the success. You've done it now for 2 years, and so what kind of success are you having with this truancy process?
So the idea is to help keep families out of the criminal truancy court. That is the concept. And what we've been able to do is create a process where we take the truancy prevention measures that are under state statute for schools, and we highly formalize the truancy prevention measure process. And we create a tribunal where you have a sitting tribunal school magistrate, or if you want to call them a school judge or a school master, but they are a truancy prevention measure tribunal master. And what we do is that we bring the parents and the students in. We treat it as if they're going to court, when in fact they're not. They're going into the truancy prevention measure tribunal, but we serve them with formal process, not with a peace officer, but by email or by mail, or even through a truancy prevention facilitator. But the form itself looks very court-like and summons them to the tribunal hearing. And so when they get there, they're prepared for, oh my goodness, we've really gone as far as we can go with this. And they don't have any idea what the next step is. And then all of a sudden they find out, hey, if we can fix all of this at this level, at the school level, then there's no need for you to be charged with criminal charges and look at fines of up to $500 per unexcused absence. And that's been embraced by the community to the extent that we have now seen in a tribunal format over 1,400 kids in Houston, Beaumont, Richardson, Mesquite, Plano, Frisco, Godley. And so the diversity is there. In downtown Dallas, almost forgot, also in downtown Dallas. So we're dealing with poverty. We're dealing with culture. We're dealing with all of the very hard, difficult tasks that education is sometimes faced with. And to this date, we still have not had a single student that we've had to take to court. And so that, speaks volumes. And we had no idea we were going to find this kind of success, especially during a pandemic.
Well, I like to brag on you because we were your first district to invite you in. And now we've completed, or getting close to completing, our second year with you. And we have, and I was proud to show the board this morning, a 98% attendance rate as a district.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Which means sometimes we have 100% attendance. Every once in a while, because you can't have a bunch of low averages, right? So every once in a while we hit 100, and we might hit a 96 every once in a while now. But that is something that we can clearly put on the truancy process that you brought to our district. And so, but I did want you to talk about other district success, because some of them are much bigger than we are. Like your biggest district, not too far northwest of here. What kind of success have you had there?
So, and again, the same that we've had with Legacy. Here's what's been really nice is that because our process really fits everybody, every angle, every part of a student in education coming together, it really doesn't matter where it's at. And we have found that out because of how we've had success in the different communities throughout the state of Texas. So in the district that we're working with north of Dallas County, up in Collin County, that district has 66,000 students in it. We have held tribunals since September. We increased to 2 tribunals a day in January all the way till the end of May. So the second semester, we went from 1 tribunal a week to now 2 tribunals a week. And again, we haven't had a single student have to go to court. Don't get me wrong. We have students and families that are challenged, and we have to work with them, and we have to find solutions with them. So it's not as if every student comes in and then at their next meeting, right,
they're magically,
right.
Yeah, no, there's no magic wand.
Yeah, and so there are some students that we have worked with, where we've had to modify their truancy prevention measures, which gives us an additional 45 days to work with them and help families. And the response has been amazing from the families in our large districts, in our small districts, in our medium-sized districts. They're very thankful that the schools have taken such a socially responsible approach to truancy, where they're not just running everybody to court and really trying to dig in deep and find out what's going on to really provide solutions for the families and the students that live or attend that district.
So that's what I really like about it. I did half a day of tribunals today, and I love the approach that you have trained us on, and that is the support approach. This is not a punishment tribunal. This tribunal is actually about figuring out together with the family what is causing the absence, or absences, of course, and
Right.
then what solutions can we put together that the child and the parent will respond to favorably because they're part of the discussion. And so I've seen things like needing to get kids in counseling because they're sending us messages. And sometimes those messages are pretty easy for us to read. Sometimes not the parents so much, but it is for us. And so as soon as we get the child some counseling, those grades go up and the attendance gets better. Or let's see, as soon as we resolve some of the issues with the parent, oftentimes the outcome of a messy parent, a parent that's not healing their SELs, right? Their social emotional stuff.
Right.
The way the kids behave is directly related to the parent issues. And so we talked to a young lady today, matter of fact, about 4-H. And her mother told us she loves animals. And so we said, oh my gosh, let's get you in the Collin County 4-H program. And if you pull those grades up, they will give you a scholarship to go be a vet tech. I told her I will go to my vet and I will get you an internship in there because they interned my daughter when she was your age. So, I mean, those are things that we can do. And that little girl sort of sat up a little bit straighter, right? Because we're talking about her, for her, and with her.
Well, and it's an engagement. All of a sudden, the pandemic has been real good about really showing this feeling or this emotion of feeling abandoned or alone. And by re-engaging with these families and these students, they feel like they're back a part of the school community. For so long having to stay at home and do schooling, the fear of, do I get the rest of my family sick if I go back to school too early? And so there's this disconnect feeling, not to mention what you would have before the pandemic when they would feel disconnected. And so it's a re-engagement. What you did today was re-engage with a student, and you piqued that student, not so much because you came up with the idea of 4-H, but because you cared enough to try to relate something to her. And that means a lot to a student. And so, and building trust back again, you built trust back today. Instead of coming at her and attacking, you took a, hey, let's step back. What can we do for you? And she responded. Today in my tribunals, I had a young girl and her mom just start bawling. I had a day today, which was just fantastic. Every single student I had perfect attendance, and their grades went up between 50 and 60 points in some cases, and on average 22 points a class for these kids. And so we went from failing grades to passing all of our classes. And this kid had perfect attendance. I guess she had never had perfect attendance. Her grades were all passing for the first progress report quarter of the school year, and we re-engaged her. And so a big part of it is re-engaging, reaching out, and making them a part of what we're doing.
Yeah, I have to laugh sometimes because I will sometimes get a child, because we monitor, right? We have kids come back, the families come back after 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and we we check their attendance. We check to see if those grades are trending up. And sometimes we just see that we need to order the student back to the campus because they're still face-to-face, virtual at home. And I have had parents say, can they go back tomorrow? So, which makes me laugh. But the parent wasn't able to say that to their kid, that they thought maybe the kid needed to go back to school. But because we ordered it to happen, and it actually happens, those grades start going up. And so sometimes we have to do a little bit of the parenting, and that's okay. It's still support. It's still helping the child, and it's a win-win because we get kids whose grades are going up. I made deals today, Judge. I made deals with a senior, and that is that the senior is struggling a little bit with like three courses, but what the deal was, if he can pass 2 out of those 3, we would let him walk and go do the ceremony as long as he understood that he wouldn't receive his diploma until he finished passed that third course this summer after the graduation ceremony. And so, as we chunked it, we made it doable, and he left there understanding that he had some work to do here, but now we gave him a carrot on the end of that stick. And so, and I'll tell you, that mom has 10 kids. She has 8 at our school. And I think she speaks Spanish. And so these are kids who really need more support from us. They need those other adults who can come in and come up with plans to help them get through and make it through those big life goals.
Well, and again, the key is you reached out and you found a trust point. He didn't expect that. He was expecting you to say, hey, man, sorry, too bad. Right. And instead it was, you know what, we can work around this and we can make this happen for you. But understand, you don't get it until you complete. That student will go out and finish his last course because you have created a walk of trust with that student. And that's what I find with students and young age children is that they lose trust in adults. And we have to rebuild that trust. And if we will look at it that way, rather than looking at it as if they're being defensive or angry, and think that their world is really centered around our world, and understand that they've probably got something going on and they need someone to trust, well, the world would change, I'll tell you.
Well, again, it's not an easy process, and I will admit, and you know this to be true, it took us 2 years, because last year, our first year with you, trying to get our adults to think in that way, that student-centered way, in an efficient truancy process way, that's not easy. And I think you're finding that probably in most districts, that the first period of time, whether it takes some districts 6 months, whether it takes them a year, there is a period where your adults just need time they need time to buy into the value of this process, right?
And it's true. I mean, and it's in all the districts we've gone through, including little old Godley out in Godley, Texas, west of Fort Worth. I mean, there has to be a buy-in. And here at Legacy, we've all bought in now, from staff down, from the teachers, the attendance clerk, all the way to the directors. They've all bought in and they're all participating, which is what's helping connect with our student population to get them back into school.
Well, I would tell you, I saw an increase in the buy-in once I started meeting every Monday. I meet with the PIEMS director, the student information director, our virtual school manager, and our operations senior director. We go over the enrollment numbers and the attendance every week. And what that does is that, first of all, it added value to the process in the eyes of those others that I'm getting involved at that level, and that all of a sudden we have weekly eyes on what is now, we understand, anomaly data that has to do, for example, if we get a 95 or 96% attendance for one of the days last week, then we know chances are there's some teachers that didn't take attendance right, or it was testing. I caught a lot of testing error around kids being marked absent during testing days last week. And so we're able to do that cleanup and get that 95 back up to whatever it should be, whether it's 97, 98, and so forth. And so having weekly eyes by higher ups, it for us turned out to be a very positive thing. I don't know if you get that with other districts.
Oh, very much so. Very much so. And even our largest district at 66,000 students, it has taken a buy-in at the top, and that buy-in at the top is what's created the buy-in at the campus level and at the special programs type level.
Well, I appreciate you coming on and sharing with us the updates. What next time you come on, I hope that you will have dollar amounts. I love, data, and I would love for you to share with us how much money you saved different districts across Texas this year. So put that on your to-do list in your free time.
Will do. Well, and we've got one district in through February the 1st. So we're waiting to see what the rest of it is from that district. So, but it's a big number.
Well, we appreciate you coming on and sharing with us the update. I hope parents and educators who are saying, wait a minute, we don't have a 98%, and we don't have this kind of process, that you might ask why we're not having a process at our school which gets to the root of the issues in a very supportive way. So thank you for that, Judge Payton, and we'll see you soon.
See you soon.
Thanks. So one of the things that we've talked about with Judge Payton is the engagement factor, right? And keeping kids engaged and wanting to be motivated to do work and to be more, right? Unfortunately, COVID has had a downer impact on kids, especially middle school kids. We've talked about that previously. And so it's really important that we, as family members and as educators, find ways to engage our kids and make them tune into this world, because they don't often live in our world. They've got a world going up in their heads and in their devices, and sometimes device head, right? And so, as all of you know, I am very family centered and like to bring opportunities to have families come together, and when educators who have families do that, they can use some of these games and fun engagement activities with not only their own families, but also with their kids at school. So we're going to talk first about some fun April and May activities that you can do together. You know that April showers is a sort of a big theme. We know that spring is here. We know that it's nature's way of starting the growing process, the blooming process. And so let's talk about what we can do when we have lots of rain, when we have a rainy day, a rainy weekend, rainy day off. What can we do with our family, right? And so I will share a few activities that are very, very not only good for families, but they're good from an educational standpoint. Game night. Now, I don't know how many of you know that playing board games is actually very good for kids as far as math, strategies. Just there's a lot of good things that happen when kids have to figure out how to win and not cheat, by the way. The classic rainy day activity can't be overrated. Gathering together around boards like Scrabble, Pictionary, Trivial Pursuit. Of course, Scrabble, what do we know about Scrabble? It's about spelling words, right? And Pictionary, doing a picture and having to verbalize, getting kids to verbalize around pictures is huge. It's a very big cognitive development activity. Monopoly, newer games like headbands can provide fun for hours, but it's also good academically. So you can serve some of your family favorite finger foods and select some nice music. And just, those are things that kids remember and oftentimes bring to their own families when they have them. A food bar, this was sort of fun. Set up fun fixings for everyone to get creative. And whether you're making your own pizzas, designing your own ice cream sundaes, topping a giant baked potato, sampling various types of chili options. The act of personalizing something delicious and then enjoying your creation together is simply a good time. And of course, you can make it a more educational by having menus. You encourage kids to find a menu, and of course, mathematically, they have to figure out if they have enough servings, if the menu is going to serve the family, all of that. And so there's lots of math there. And just kids who are picky tend to eat what they fix too, by the way. So that, I thought that was a really cute idea. Taco bar, by the way. They didn't put a taco bar, but in Texas, I grew up with taco bars in Texas, right? So you do your ground beef and your cheese and your tomatoes and your onions and your black olives and jalapenos and different salsas. And for me now, of course, I'm vegetarian, so I would put some other meat source in there, which is not meat. I need to do another show on vegetarian lifestyle. But so again, having kids help you with that, fun. And of course, you can do that at school as well to back up. If you're doing a cultural event, you can have food and the kids can bring food. It's just a good time. A couple of weeks ago, we had Daniel Eng on, and we were talking about the Asian unrest and racism. And in his mind, if we could all sit at the table together and share food from our different backgrounds, we would be better together for that. So there you go. And then movie marathon, it's a rainy day. So pick a trilogy and run with it. Take a movie night to a whole new level by picking a theme and theming your snacks and your decor if you're crafty to coincide with the movie trilogy for like Star Wars or Indiana Jones or Lord of the Rings, Chronicle of Narnia, Back to the Future. So, again, those are memories that kids remember. You take pictures, you have that you share with the grandparents of what fun stuff you've done. Maybe you include the grandparents, they FaceTime in, but there's just all of these great ideas. Get crafty. A rainy day is a great opportunity to tackle a house project that the whole family's been interested in doing and diving into a craft project like repainting the playroom, building a birdhouse for the backyard, or putting together a 1,000-piece puzzle. Of course, puzzles are very brain friendly too. Working together on something creative is a bonding opportunity, guys. And then travel down memory lane together. Spend the day enjoying and reminiscing about your treasured family memories as you go through your family photos and videos. And if you've been meaning to get photos printed for an album or to display in frames, then what better time than have your kids help you pick those out. Now, one of the things that I've done recently is to, because we downsized and we went to a smaller house, we didn't have room for all the pictures and the picture frames. I mean, husband and I have been married close to 42 years and have 3 kids, 6 grandkids. We had a lot of pictures, folks. And so we just didn't have any place for all of those photos in our smaller home. So what we've done is we've started taking all of those pictures out of the frames, making sure they have years and names on them. And then I bought artist portfolios. And what we're doing is we're putting the pictures in by years into this artist portfolio to share as a big album for those type of memory lane moments with the grandkids and the kids. And so being able to take that to a family reunion or just opening it up during a birthday party when a lot of relatives are there, you'll be the hit of the party if you do that. So there's an opportunity always to make sure your kids know more about the family. You just sometimes have to get a little bit creative. And so speaking of creative, we also have Mother's Day coming. And I thought, whoa, all of us need Mother's Day ideas, right? And so I have an article here that says 6 no-fail Mother's Day gift ideas. And most of them don't cost any money. So if you want to give, you probably have to give your husband if you're male, you're female, or if you're male and you have kids, then you can bring these ideas to your kids. But, it can be challenging to bring just the right gift to show mom that she's loved and appreciated. And so how about this? Have the kids do a coupon book, right? The coupon book to clean a car, clean up the garden or the flower bed, weed eat. So there are opportunities for spring cleaning that kids can do. And, they will enjoy making the coupon book. They may not enjoy having to do what the coupons say, but that's part of getting kids to follow through and to do what they said they were going to do, right? But it's just free to have kids show mom how much they appreciate her by actually helping her and around the house. So a night away. Now, while mom loves her family more than anything, time alone may be just the rejuvenating experience that she needs. And so send mom away by herself. That's right. Maybe you send her to a spa morning, give her tickets to go to her favorite movie. Maybe she likes movies that nobody else in the family likes to watch. So, just having her have some alone time. If you have a mom that, every once in a while likes to get away, or maybe arrange with a girlfriend that they have a lunch out or a night out so that it's arranged and there's coverage for the kids at home. And of course, making sure that the house is not a disaster when mom gets back would be an important part of that activity. So let's make sure that happens. And so does not a finger lifted. So of course on Mother's Day, make sure mom feels no need to lift a finger. To get this right, keep up with the tidying, the meal preparation, clean up before bed. And then the last thing mom wants to do is wake up to a double duty day after Mother's Day, right? And so if mom wakes up to breakfast in bed and then she is able to have somebody make her lunch and dinner's already prepped, whether it's going out for dinner or whether it's, again, somebody else, dad and the kids working together to bring mom her favorite dinner. But she literally doesn't have to do a thing on Mother's Day. And probably that should be on her birthday too, huh? So that she literally feels like queen for a day, right? So that would be cool. Homemade gifts. We can encourage kids to be creative and make thoughtful cards and gifts for mom. More than anything, you can buy at the store. Handmade offerings tend to be more thoughtful and be treasured. I know that whenever I got a handmade gift, a handmade card, I stuck it in my bottom drawer in the dresser. So I have all of those. Those are special. I can't throw those out. Those are very valuable to me. I like to look at them every once in a while. Just a nice thought about the kids thinking of me at that time. And most of all, don't let Mother's Day go by without expressing to mom how much she means to you and how much she's appreciated and how much her work is appreciated and how much you recognize her work. And how does this translate to teachers? If you know that your teacher has kids, you can make her a Mother's Day card while you're making your own mom one, right? I bet a teacher would treasure a Mother's Day card from her students as much as her own kids, because teachers love their students and think of them as their own children. So getting a homemade card from their students would be valuable too. And so that's something to think about as far as Mother's Day gifts and it not having to break the bank to do it. All right, so our last thing to talk about today, and because it's time to start making plans for the summer, is how do we plan vacations, right? Some of us are vaccinated, some of us are not. Our kids mostly are not because they just opened up in Texas the 16 and over. And so our under 16s are not eligible for vaccines yet. So how do we go on vacation, right? Well, I found this article, How Epidemiologists Are Planning to Vacation with Their Unvaccinated Kids. Okay, well, let's ask the virus experts, how are they planning to have vacation, which they're wanting vacation as much as anybody. They're tired of being cooped up. They haven't seen family members for a year or more also, just like many of you. And so our reporter from New York Times went and asked epidemiologists and other public health experts, a pretty cautious group, what they're planning for their own summer vacations. And here are a few takeaways. First, figure out what feels safe for you. Does the thought of getting on a plane make you queasy? And let me mention, I just watched a video yesterday about how planes circulate their air. And it's very interesting. And that's why you haven't heard big spread issues with planes. They very much are cautious and have figured out how to circulate their air so that things don't get spread all over. And I'll share what I remember. First of all, airplanes circulate half of their air out and then bring the other half in. So at any given time, half of the air is clean and new from the outside. And so it's circulating that way. It's not 100% circulated air at all times. So they already, 50% of that air is constantly going out and 50% is coming in as new air, okay? So that is very helpful. If somebody sneezes, it's very interesting. They had a demonstration of this, animated demonstration. Let's say that somebody sneezes, even wearing a mask, everybody's wearing a mask on the plane, right? But even when somebody sneezes, when you sneeze, it still pops out of the mask, right? And so they showed that the way that their air is circulated, it's that those germs, which a lot of those germs are not big enough, and that was good science to know. Many of those germs are really not big enough to be infectious. And so out of that, what would you have, that germ-filled sneeze, many of those airborne viruses are just not very big. Some are, but not all that comes out of a sneeze is contagious. And then that air circulates within compartments so that the sneeze may impact the 3 seats around you, the 3 rows of seats around you, and maybe across from you, but that's all. So if you have a sneezer in the back, the sneeze stays in the back. If you have a sneezer in the middle, the sneeze stays in the middle. And if you have a sneezer up front, it stays up there. So that's sort of interesting and may calm some worries as far as people queasiness about going on planes. So figure out what's safe for you. And so Jennifer Nuzzo, the lead epidemiologist for the Johns Hopkins Coronavirus Resource Center, is planning to travel domestically this year with her family. They've held off picking a place until they gather more information about what might be safe, but she has an exposure budget. That's interesting, right? In her exposure budget, she said she was prioritizing risks that had, let's see, so she was prioritizing risks that had a clear benefit to the health and development of her kids who are 4 and 7, such as visits with her extended family. So the health of your family members is also a big consideration, and we talked about that, gosh, last year, if you'll remember. We're very conservative as far as our health risk, said Tara C. Smith, a professor of epidemiology at the Kent State University College of Public Health in Ohio, who will be vacationing with younger relatives who aren't eligible for vaccination and have health conditions. It's not clear why some kids get sick from COVID and some don't, but the possibility of a COVID infection is not something she wants to deal with, and so they have decided to drive out of state and stay at a hotel near the beach that won't be packed with visitors. Okay. So if you're still trying to figure out what kind of risk you're willing to take, take an online risk calculator that can help. Is it safe to travel? although the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has spent the better part of a year discouraging us from traveling, right? Travel is considered low risk for those who are fully vaccinated. Most of the experts that we spoke to with the plan to drive, in part because their children are not vaccinated, because that is sort of the lowest risk for those that are not vaccinated. So what the CDC is saying, that you can travel if you're fully vaccinated, but they would think that they think that really driving is the number one safest. And then, like I said, you can fly if you're vaccinated and feel comfortable doing that. If your family does decide to drive, take precautions to lower the risk of getting infected, and to, while traveling, make sure that everyone in your group that at 2 and older wears a mask, they are 6 feet from people, avoid the crowds, wash your hands, right? Use hand sanitizer. And here's an interesting one. CDC recommends that all unvaccinated people get a coronavirus test 1 to 3 days before any trip, and again 3 to 5 days after the trip is over. They should also self-quarantine for 7 days after a trip if they get tested, and for 10 days if they don't get tested, the agency said. So, okay, and now those COVID tests are everywhere. I know we have COVID labs containers in our parking lots at both locations. So it's free, you go in there, you take a 15-minute test, and you know. So another suggestion from the CDC is take the shorter flights where passengers remove their masks less, because there's no snacks and drinks given on those those shorter flights. And I know I've been on the shorter flights. They do not give you a thing. Well, I show you that. They give you, American Airlines gives you a bag with a bottle of water and a little, they get smaller every year, bag of pretzels. So it doesn't take long to go through that if you even want to eat it. It says here, the fewer instances of documented transmissions on airplanes were longer flights. So that makes sense, right? And so where should we stay? You can camp out, you can rent a house, you can, let's see, hotels can be safe for families too, provided that you ask yourself the crucial question, can you take the right precautions and keep distance between your family members and other people while you're there? So remember, crowded elevators you don't want to do, crowded indoor restaurants if you don't have to, if you have unvaccinated people with you on your vacation. So these are great suggestions. The key, again, is to make sure that we have that feeling of safety that as we plan our trip, and the exposure budget, as one of the scientists said, and then maybe camping, a family camping trip might be the best thing, where you drive there and you know, stay in your own locations, visit with people, but again, social distancing and so forth. They're not saying don't go on vacation. They're saying be smart while you plan your vacation. As always, time is gone, and we have come to the end of our show. We thank you for being on today. We thank Kara and John for coming on and sharing their worlds and bringing that public education information to us. I hope that you left a little bit more educated in the good things happening in public education, some of the concerns happening in public education, right? And certainly some of the politics. But mostly that you left with the understanding of how important this all is and how important it is that you know it. We need to have a society that understands that making sure that we're helping kids become more than hourly wage graduates is our work. If we don't help these kids today, they're not going to help us later when we need them the most. So join me in my pub ed advocacy work and become a pub ed advocacy soldier in our Army, and Share this podcast with your friend. If you haven't liked us, go ahead and do that so that you can get notified when we're on. And stay safe, everyone. Have a great rest of the week.